Welcome, friends, to the Beaver Dam. We have a very interesting raid here right now, and this raid is rough. Now, they've just added the Naboo raid tag, which is nice because it means that we can check our overall factions, see how we're doing, see what characters we farm up, and I appreciate it. But this raid is confusing, it's long, it has so many pieces to it, so many moving parts, and it's rough. We've already had things like a glitch that causes infinite B1s. We have B2 overperforming and CG looking into it, and now we're being like, okay, it's fine for now, but we'll check back in a bit. We have, things like, just them looking, tier 0 and tier 1 are not up to specs with what we're saying they are, apparently, and you guys are telling us that, so we're going to investigate. We've had a lot of problems, especially on the lower end, and so never before have I seen more of a panic scramble for a raid, especially because the last raid coddled us hard. The time investment was long, yes, because we had so many attempts, but also we could full auto it and have zero problems. It required some remodding, which was rough. So did Crate Dragon. This one doesn't require much remodding, which I was actually very impressed by. I threw some garbage mods on my Lightspeed Bundle Jedi and managed to get like a 10 million score my first try, and I was impressed by that. And so, like, there's not a ton of remodding. My Gungans, to be fair, I do have the Raid Omicron. The Gungans full auto the entire thing with just my basic mods with them. Before that, they were getting, most of the score that they needed, which was nice. And so, like, you don't need to actually remod that much, and I very much appreciate about this. But now with the fact that we have to play through it to get a good score, the fact that we have to, go through and use this terrible barrier to entry, because there's this just awful terrible barrier to entry of what teams you can use, because it's all either new characters, and some of the new characters are actually garbage for it. Like, I was expecting Kelleran Beck to be a really good character in this raid, and he turned out to be just a very subpar Jedi for it. Like, yeah, he's usable, but I don't want to hear usable when I got him up to Relic 7 for Mommy Mandalore. I want to hear, good job, you bought a new character, go use it. And like, I see that with the Gungans, which is good, but even like Quadme seems to suffer a bit in this raid. You look at Quadme and like her decoy constantly dies off, and like I've seen a lot of people struggle with it, like they have to remod for Quadme and like do a lot to be able to get her to go right. And so the barrier to entry is really rough, because like, how many people actually have Quadme? It requires you be at least 4 million, requires that you at least get through hard conquest and at least be getting gold crate. You could drop to a lower crate a little bit, you're going to spend some money, but you need at least gold crate to be able to get her. And on top of that, those who are getting gold crate, they're just now getting her. And then on top of that, you have to farm up Qui-Gon, you have to farm up Obi-Wan, which were both marquee characters and only recently became available to farm. And so, like, there's just so much here that's such a hard barrier to entry. Luckily, they've added a couple things that are not too hard for the barrier to entry, and so we're going to talk about that and talk about how to get your guild some score. If you are a guild that is struggling with the overall ability to get score, this is the video for you. We're going to get you at least the first crate, and then we're going to give you the option for the second crate and the third crate. We're going to try and get you to a point where you're doing some good stuff. So, going into our overall teams, I want to discourage people from like requiring these teams down here, like the Quadme team, a Boss Nass team. I want to discourage that overall because it's a feel bad farm. Boss Nass and the Gungans, that's 2100 Kairos just to get them all up and running. You have to assume that the Jar Jar event's going to come back in a couple months, so you have to wait for that to be able to get the full use out of this team. On top of that, you're looking at a ton of Zetas invested, which is really rough for a lot of those people who have like Lightspeed bundles and that kind of thing. I see this being required, and it's not a feel good farm. You don't want to do these bottom ones over here. They're painful for people. Yes, do you see my beautiful Phalanx Omicron right there? I'm one of 20, top 20 in the game for Phalanx Omicron. But they are a maybe team. If you notice how I have maybe and if you can over there. I'm sorry, I'm on the other side right now. Maybe and if you can, these are the teams that are like, hey, you know, if you got a quad mate, go for this team. You know, it's going to help you with the assault battle. It's going to be helping you with the raid. And on top of that, it can get you a good score in the raid. So go for it. You know, that's the kind of thing you're looking at. Boss Nass is a great one for like low gear. Maybe you have some 6-star Gungans lying around, and maybe you don't necessarily have the time to work on your Gungans too much, but you're looking for a lower gear option. You can drop the Gungans up to like gear 10, drop a couple Zetas on them. If you can afford the Raid Omicron, it definitely helps to get that raid score in. Of course, the Raid Omicron is another not feel good farm, so maybe don't do it. But dropping a couple Zetas on this, especially some, you know, Boss Nass Zetas and that type of thing, it's going to help a ton in getting this team off the ground, giving you some good stuff. Also, low gear, they can take out Geonosians of any size, and so it's a good little thing to have in Grand Arena in your back pocket in case you run into some, you know, Geos that you're not expecting. So, not necessarily the worst feel bad farm. If you don't take them up all the way, you can still get some use out of them, and then eventually they're going to lead into Jar Jar, which is one of the best Grand Arena teams in the game right now. And so it's not the most feel bad farm. It's just the fact that, you know, it takes so much to get these guys up, takes so much to get these guys up, and the return on investment, it's great. It really is great, but the barrier to entry, the hardness of getting that many Chirotechs for either of these teams or having a quad main in your roster is quite high. So we want to look at these top teams. These top teams are my 2 favorite teams, and I'll explain why. And we will have a couple videos coming out soon talking about how these teams work and how to use them. So with these teams right here, we have a beautiful B2. Now, we've already had CG come out and say B2 was overperforming, and then them kind of rescind that and be like, okay, maybe not. Now, I want to talk about B2 for a second. B2 is a little bit of a hard sell for this, because B2 doesn't necessarily have any Rex, but he has a rote requirement. Rise of the Empire, he's required, which is why I have him at Relic 6. But also, he's kind of useful in a ton of teams. He's useful for General Grievous. He's useful for getting gas. He's also really, really useful in the fact that he can work with Afra as well. Now, would you overall use him with Afra? Probably not often, but hey, it's another tool to have in your roster. It is a future investment, though. Next up, we got Nute Gunray. This is kind of the pop-in, pop-out leader. I've heard good things. I've heard problematic things. It all just depends on mods is what it feels like. The B2 Super Battle Droid lead seems like the go-to if you don't have good mods and you're just trying to get through this raid, helping out your guild as much as you can. We got Nute Gunray. Nute Gunray is required for Lord Vader. He has a thing in, you know, Darkside Geo. He's just a great character in general to have. His team can take down, you know, the Qui-Gon Omicron, which is a very cheap trade for Nute Gunray for the Qui-Gon Omicron. So he has some great usefulness in this game. I throw him on, you know, my General Grievous team at this gear 10 that I have him at right now, and I kill JML. So, like, he's really not a bad character to have in your roster. So it doesn't feel bad to get him. Magna Guard, requirement for JMK, requirement for gas. Doesn't feel bad at all to get him up. He's also another tank. You can never have too many tanks in your roster. Great with GG. Darth Maul, Darth Sidious. These are a little bit more feel bad because a lot of the times these are farms that you aren't necessarily looking at anytime soon, especially for those of you who are Lightspeed bundlers, because a lot of people are assuming that we're going to get a Sith Eternal Lightspeed bundle, but at least a gear 12 is going to help. So if you can get these guys to gear 12, right here you have 450k, you know, yeah, that's really what you're shooting for. You're shooting for, you know, a couple teams that have some good score in them. And so 450k throughout your entire guild is going to get you the first box. It's not the first box, but it's the 20 million box. It's the one that really makes it worth it to be in the raid. So if you can get everyone in your guild to get the 450k, you're really not going to struggle at all. And so, you know, just having one of these teams up to gear 12, gonna be great. And like, this is also not a bad one because, like, you don't need a ton of Zetas, honestly, to get this going and keep it going. You really don't need a ton of Zetas. And then, you know, the Darth Maul, the Darth Sidious, the requirements for Leviathan, requirements for Sith Eternal. And so they have their uses in the game. They're just not great characters overall. Here's to hoping we get like an Omicron on Darth Sidious like his Datacron was. We're probably not going to. Maybe we'll get a Darth Maul rework at some point. I really, really hope so, but at the moment, it just looks like these are going to be a couple characters that are just so-so in your roster, and they'll be just backup Sith to throw on like a Traya squad or on defense or something. But anyways, getting this team to Gear 12, going to be great for your guild to get you guys up to that 450. Now you got your top priority, in my opinion, because this one is the one that you have to go out of your way for, but it's also going to be one that doesn't feel too bad either. Yes, it does have Kit Fisto and Kiadi Mundi. Very easy to farm, but they're not helpful in the game like at all. I proudly used them with my Jedi Master Luke against a crap team the other day. Could JML have soloed the team? Yes. It was just for the memes. But these two characters really don't actually help that much. They're just helpful for the raid, and that's the one feel bad thing about it, but they are the overall engine. You need a Jedi healer, basically, a Galactic Republic healer, and then you need the potency up that Kit Fisto gives to make this team pop. And we will explain fully about how this team works in another video. But Mace Windu you got here, he's a requirement for JMK. He's a fleet commander. He's just not a bad thing. Same with Grandmaster Yoda. Great Jedi to use in any Jedi team. Both of these are great Jedi in any Jedi team. Plus Grandmaster Yoda is required for JMK. So it's just, it feels good. You can relic these guys, you can get them up to Gear 12, and you don't feel bad at all. Plo Koon, he's a pilot, and he's one of the keys to doing all kinds of ship counters with the Negotiator, and so getting him up to Gear 12 isn't bad. He also fits with Star Killer. He's not a bad Jedi in general to have in your roster, so also another not feel bad one. You can also replace this Plo Koon with something like like a Qui-Gon. Any of these guys you can replace with a Qui-Gon, because Qui-Gon's also usable in the raid, and also he's the Omicron character. He's required for JMK, and so you can fit him in here as well if you already have him and still do something similar. And you just want as many characters as you can to spread buffs. That's kind of the whole point of this team, is to spread buffs. So these are the two that I would suggest, because if you can get, let's just say right now, you were to get these two teams to Gear 12, you get we're going to say average 700k, right? And you have 700k insteed of your 900k. We're going to say 700, 650, somewhere in there. Then you have like 10, maybe 15 people in your guild that bought the Lightspeed bundle. They're getting 1.2 mil just from that one. They build in this droid team. They get another couple hundred. Maybe some of your guys have Quad May and they go for that. Or maybe one of your guys is whaled and you got Boss Nass. And you can really push your crate much higher just by having those couple people carry and then a couple people with this team. But overall, trying to have them build these bottom two teams, if they didn't have an already previous sectioned off part for it, is going to be very much a struggle. And the nice thing is with these guys, you don't really need a mod too well to get some solid scores as well. So I feel like this is the best route to get in both 450k per person, so that way you're getting at least rewards in the Naboo raid, but then also kind of pushing you along that path to getting higher crates as well. And then these bottom ones, like trying to get yourself a Boss Nass team with a couple Zetas, not a bad option on top of it. But I feel like just bare minimum these two teams. If you want to push your guild to push them up to relics, you can. It's not going to feel the best to get Luminara and Kit Fisto up to relics, but the rest you can feel pretty good about relicking up, and so I do appreciate that. At least we have a couple good performing teams that don't feel too bad to get up. For those of us who are like just coming off Lightspeed bundles or not too far into the game. So hopefully this has kind of helped you guys conceptualize what your goals should be for your guild, to try to push your guild into the spot where you guys can do something good in the raid, to be able to at least get that 22.5 mil crate, maybe get that 60 and go past that. But just getting a couple teams, it shouldn't be too hard to get into the raid. Gear 12 is easy nowadays. I don't know if you guys noticed on these teams, but there's not a single Kyrotech character on these teams, which makes it so you can just do it with Get One currency, which makes it much, much easier versus this bottom area where it's, oh yeah, we'll get 500 right there, 400 there, 400 there, 2100 right there. So like these top two teams are a low barrier to entry, or rather not the low barrier to entry, but the lowest barrier that we can possibly do with this raid. If you have any questions at all, please let me know in the comments if you guys need help modding these characters. Overall, they don't need a ton of modding, but there's a ton of good mod guides out there. You can ignore a lot of like the speed things, because a lot of speed things are referring to like if you have high relics and stuff, and so like the best mods that you can put on them. But there's tons of good graphics. You can go and find these in basically anyone's discords. You know, we have a lot of wonderful people in the Galaxy Heroes communities, and so, you know, like this one was put out by Caw Patrol, and so you can see here you got all of the modding for this setup, and like you can go through and there's tons of these from tons of different people, and so go check out, you know, all kinds of people like Zareth. They make tons of good stuff like that where you can go through. It'll tell you kind of the basic overview of how to use the team and that kind of thing, and we'll make a couple of videos on that just to help you guys out. But regardless, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.